My name is Ashley Foster. I'm 29. My family mocked my metalwork. Years later, when my brother-in-law's hedge fund collapsed, they tried to take my property to bail him out. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. I own a small metal fabrication shop, the kind of place where sparks fly, machines hum, and steel bends under my hands. But to my family, it's nothing more than a hobby. Eric and I were married under the sprawling oak tree on my grandmother's property 4 years ago. The air smell of summer hay and the faint earthy sweetness of wild flowers. We had arranged everything ourselves. Hay bales for seating, lanterns swinging gently in the breeze, a barbecue pit that filled the space with warmth and comfort. Eric arrived in his worn work boots and a simple shirt, looking completely at ease. While my family would inevitably arrive in a parade of judgment, they didn't disappoint. Dad's polished Audi gleamed in the sunlight. He checked his watch every few minutes, a subtle display of impatience. Mom's expression was permanently etched with disapproval, as though she were calculating the amount of money we'd wasted by not renting a country club. My sister Olivia and her husband Matthew arrived as if they were stepping onto the red carpet and not into a backyard wedding. Silk, sequins, and stilettos, the whole performance. The ceremony passed smoothly, punctuated by the occasional snide glance from my family. Eric held my hand tightly throughout, his grip grounding me against the tide of judgment. When the officiant reached the moment to speak on love and partnership, I could feel the eyes of my family sizing me up, silently, noting how my life was less than theirs. Then came the speeches. My best friend, Tom, was first. He shared a story about a steel bookshelf I'd welded in college that had nearly crushed our roommate when it collapsed. Laughter rippled across the guests. Then Matthew stood, glass in hand, with that smirk, the one that always meant he was about to lecture everyone on how clever he was. He reminded the room of his 5 years of experience advantage over me. Business courses, finance work, a trajectory toward Wall Street brilliance. He lifted his glass toward Eric and me with a patronizing smile. I admire anyone who thinks they can live off simpler pleasures, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. It takes courage. I felt Eric squeeze my hand and I met his eyes. He was silently telling me it didn't matter. I could see it. His steady gaze, the warmth and pride in his smile. Unlike my family, he understood what it meant to create something real, to fight for it. But my sister Olivia wasn't finished, rising next to Matthew. Her voice was laced with fox admiration. I'm so proud of my little sister for embracing this rustic life, she said, gesturing at the hay bales and handmade decorations. Eric, you're really brave for adapting. I can never give up my weekly shopping trips or spa days. Her words stung, not for the surface insult, but for the implication that we were living beneath them, insignificant. Dad nodded in agreement, silently tallying my supposed failures while standing in his 1,000 suit. After everyone left, Eric and I stayed behind, cleaning up what had been our dream wedding. We worked side by side, the quiet rustle of the leaves above us the only sound. They aren't worth it, Eric finally said, brushing a stray flower petal off the table. I know, I replied, staring at the fading sunlight. I know exactly what we're building here. It matters, even if they can't see it. And in that quiet moment, I thought of the experiments I had begun in the back corner of my shop. Years ago, while everyone else was mocking my work, I had been obsessed with a project, a way to molecularly treat steel and aluminum to make them stronger, lighter, and resistant to corrosion, all while being environmentally safe. I had no idea it would one day become the weapon with which I would outsmart the very family that doubted me. For now, though, it was only sparks, metal shavings, and the scent of ambition. Eric wrapped his arm round me, and I felt a flicker of hope. If the world wouldn't recognize our worth, we'd build ourselves, quietly, patiently, without needing approval. Little did I know that the family who mocked me that day would eventually come begging. but not for the reasons they expected. 3 years passed after our wedding. Life had settled into a rhythm of controlled chaos at the shop. Sparks flew, still bent, and my hands were perpetually coated with grime. But in the corner of that organized chaos, something extraordinary was taking shape. While my family assumed I was still tinkering with garden gates and decorative railings, I was secretly perfecting a revolutionary process. I had discovered a method to molecularly treat metals, making them stronger, lighter, and corrosion-resistant without harming the environment. Eric became my anchor during those long nights. He had always worked with his hands, yes, but he also understood the patience, the subtle obsession required to turn a dream into reality. After his long days at the conservation center, he would return home to find me covered in metal shavings and chemical compounds, scribbling notes and adjusting experiments. He never complained. Instead, he quietly watched, occasionally offering a suggestion or bringing me coffee. The breakthrough came after years of trial and error. My first few attempts failed spectacularly. Test pieces cracked, warped, or rusted. In days, I remember one evening Eric sat beside me as I stared at yet another ruined prototype. Despair etched across my face. "Ashley," he said softly, "you've done this 1,000 times. You'll get it, you always do." And that night, almost like a miracle born of persistence, the formula worked. Steel beams that once bent under pressure now resisted crushing force. Aluminum panels that corroded in months now gleamed as if untouched by time. I had created something tangible, something that could change the world of metal fabrication. I registered patents in my name, establishing a small LLC, Forged Tech Solutions. Eric and I kept it secret, quietly negotiating licenses with industrial manufacturers. By the time Matthew's hedge fund collapsed, Forged Tech Solutions had grown into a business valued at over $7 million. Meanwhile, my family carried on in their delusions of superiority. Olivia flaunted her luxury lifestyle on social media. Matthew boasted of his brilliant investment strategies, and Dad continued to look down on my humble metal shop. They had no idea that the little workshop they had mocked was the foundation of a multi-million-dollar empire. One afternoon, I received a call from my cousin Rachel, her voice tinged with urgency. "Ashley, you need to listen. Matthew's in serious trouble. I overheard your parents talking. He's lost everything, and they're coming for you." I froze. I had anticipated this day for years, but not in such stark, sudden terms. "Coming for me?" I asked. "Yes." Rachel said, "They're talking about selling your property, using it to bail him out. They see your success as the family's safety net." I hung up and turned to Eric. He didn't flinch. He just nodded, the calm in his eyes grounding me. "They don't know who they're dealing with," he said quietly, "but they're about to find out." 3 days later, the courier arrived. A fancy envelope embossed with a law firm's insignia landed on my doorstep. It contained a demand: sell my property to cover Matthew's losses or face legal action. I handed the papers to Eric, who read them carefully, a small smile tugging at his lips. "This is going to be fun," he said. We immediately called our attorney. Mark, who had been with us since Forged Tech Solutions had begun to gain traction. Within hours, he assured us that the claim was baseless. The land had been legally moved into the corporate structure of Forged Tech Solutions 2 years prior. Even if I wanted to sell it, I legally could not. I remember standing in my shop that morning, watching 3 cars approach the driveway. Dad's Audi, Matthew's less impressive BMW, and a third carrying a lawyer. My heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and anger. They believed they were coming to force me into submission. But I had something far more potent than money or brute legal threats. I had truth, preparation, and ingenuity. Eric squeezed my hand. "Let them talk," he said. "We've got the facts, the law, and each other. That's more than enough." And as they stormed through the doors demanding control, I felt a surge of calm for the first time in years. I wasn't the family joke. I wasn't the failure. I was in command. My life, my creation, my rules. The doors to the shop slammed open, and they walked in like they owned the place. Dad led the charge, his face flushed, eyes scanning the room as if it were a battlefield. Mom followed, mascara strand trembling. Olivia, her carefully curated social media persona crumbling, clung to Matthew's arm, and Matthew looked like the weight of his own hubris had finally collapsed upon him. Behind them, the lawyer trailed with a briefcase, trying to maintain some semblance of authority. I stood beside Eric at the main workbench, my hands folded, my expression calm. Eric's presence steadied me. His quiet confidence radiated like a shield. Dad's voice cracked as he spoke. Ashley, we need to talk. This situation is critical. I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the tension to tighten. I see, I said. And what exactly are you here for? Mom stepped forward, her voice shaking. You have to help Matthew. He's lost everything. We thought you could. I cut her off. I see. You thought I would bail him out. You thought I would sacrifice everything I've built because he couldn't manage his own recklessness. My gaze swept across the room. You've spent 25 years belittling me, dismissing my work, laughing at my choices, and now, because your son-in-law's empire has collapsed, suddenly I'm valuable. Olivia's face twisted with anger and desperation. Ashley, please, you don't understand. This is family. We family. I echoed, my voice low and sharp. Family doesn't bet against my success and then demand I ruin myself to save them from their own mistakes. Matthew's face palled as he realized the tables had turned. His confident posture wavered. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. The same fear that comes when someone realizes they've misjudged an opponent entirely. Eric stepped forward slightly, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. They don't get it, he said quietly. But that's okay, we do. I picked up the folder they had left on my workbench. It was filled with purchase agreements, property valuations, and other legal documents intended to intimidate me. I set it down gently, almost ceremoniously, and addressed their lawyer. Do you understand property law? I asked, my tone cold, measured, because if you do, you'll know that this land isn't for sale. It was transferred into the corporate structure of Forged Tech Solutions 2 years ago. Legally, there's nothing you can do to compel me to sell it. The lawyer's confident mask filtered. He glanced at Dad, who turned a shade of red that spoke volumes about the desperation simmering beneath his polished exterior. I continued, my voice rising with quiet authority. But let me clarify something else. Forged Tech Solutions isn't a hobby. It's not a garden gate. It's a multi-million-dollar enterprise built from the ground up over 5 years. Patents, proprietary methods, licensing deals. It's all mine, and it's thriving. Matthew's lips parted, but no words came out. Olivia fell to the floor, mascara streaking her cheeks, tears soaking her carefully styled hair. Mom gasped and Dad's jaw clenched as if he were trying to physically restrain himself from speaking. I pulled out a financial report from the drawer. This, I said, laying it on the bench, is the exact document showing Matthew's largest bet, over $900,000 against my company. He shorted Forged Tech Solutions because he was convinced I couldn't possibly succeed, and he lost every last penny. Matthew's face drained of color. He whispered almost incoherently, Forged Tech Solutions? Yes, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. You underestimated me. You thought the little metal shop was nothing. You were wrong. Eric stepped closer, his hand on my back as a silent support. The universe has a sense of irony, he murmured. They made their choices. You made yours. The room fell silent, the weight of truth pressing on everyone. Olivia sobbed. Mom's mouth opened and closed without sound. And Dad looked like a man confronting a reality he had refused to see for decades. I addressed them one last time. I am not selling, I am not negotiating, and I am not apologizing. You had your chance to support me, to respect me, and you failed. This ends now. With that, I turned to Eric and Mark, who had just arrived, his briefcase in hand and a knowing smile on his face. "Shall we?" Mark stepped forward, explaining calmly that any attempt to force a sale would be dismissed immediately. He had already investigated Matthew's hedge fund collapse and uncovered investor deception and poor judgment. Legal action against me would be futile. I watched as the family, once so dominant, so confident, was reduced to stunned silence. Matthew trembled. Olivia clung to him crying, while Mom and Dad slowly realized that their expectations, their attempts to manipulate and control had failed utterly. I finally turned away, letting them stew in their own reckoning. The 3 cars left the driveway one by one, and for the first time in 25 years, I felt the quiet, intoxicating rush of freedom. Eric took my hand as we walked back into the shop. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I've never been better," I replied, smiling. They wanted to control me. They wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they got to see the truth. And we're still standing. We walked among the sparks, the machines, the evidence of our sweat and determination. Forge Tech Solutions was more than a business. It was our triumph, our secret weapon, our vindication. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever hold me back again. The week after the confrontation passed in a surreal haze. There were no phone calls, no frantic emails, and no more attempts from my family to pressure me. It was quiet, almost eerily so, but for the first time. That silence was liberating rather than suffocating. Eric and I spent our days immersed in the workshop, perfecting the latest batch of type-encoded railings and experimenting with new industrial applications. The machines hummed, sparks flew, and the smell of hot metal and chemicals filled the air, a scent that now smelled like victory instead of struggle. Sophie's absence from the day-to-day R&D at the Conservation Center had been replaced by her full-time involvement at Forge Tech Solutions. She had a laser focus now, pouring herself into refining the coding process, checking patents, and ensuring that every detail was perfect. I was proud, not just because the business thrived, but because we had built something that was truly ours. Then came Rachel's visit. She pulled into the driveway one Saturday afternoon, a casserole dish in her hands and worry etched into her features. "Ashley," she said breathlessly, "I need to talk to you." I smiled, gesturing toward the porch swing. "Come on in. You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world." She hesitated, then exhaled. "It's your family. They're a mess. Olivia and Matthew. It's over. He's broken, really broken. Mom and Dad. They've barely left the house in days. They keep replaying what happened." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "I expected that. They thought you'd forgive them eventually," Rachel continued. "They can't understand that blood doesn't automatically mean loyalty. You weren't the problem. You were the only one doing something real." I let that sink in. 25 years of being dismissed, ridiculed, and overlooked. And now, finally, someone acknowledged the truth. I felt a strange mix of vindication and peace. Rachel smiled faintly. "They wanted to apologize gently, but they know better now. They know you're not the same girl who needed their approval." "Good," I said simply. "I'm not going to pretend to forgive them for their mistakes. That time is over. I don't owe them anything." She nodded, relieved. "And Sophie, she's doing well. She's thriving," I said. "Her work at Forge Tech Solutions is essential. I wouldn't have been able to do this without her." Rachel lingered for a few more minutes, chatting about small, mundane things until she finally left. As I watched her drive away, I realized something fundamental. For the first time in my life wasn't defined by the expectations or judgments of my family. It was mine entirely. 2 months later, an unexpected email changed the game once again. It was from Major Industrial Coatings, a reputable industrial corporation. They were offering $20 million to acquire Forge Tech Solutions. I read the email twice, then laughed aloud, the sound startling me with its freedom. Eric leaned over my shoulder, eyes widening as he read the amount, $2,020 million. He repeated incredulous. "Yes," I said. my heart pounding, and it's ours to accept if we choose. But this time, the decision is completely ours. No one else's opinions matter. We spent the next week deliberating, weighing the pros and cons, but there was no real question. This wasn't just about money. It was about autonomy, security, and proving that we had succeeded on our own terms. 3 months later, the acquisition was finalized. The money arrived instantly, transforming the scope of what we could do. The first thing I did was pay off the property entirely, free and clear. Without mortgages, liens, or external control, the land that my grandmother had entrusted to me, the shop that had been my proving ground, was mine forever. Next, I set up a trust to protect our assets. No one, neither my family nor creditors, could touch what we had earned. And then, almost instinctively, I made a donation to the conservation center where Sophie had worked. It was a gesture that reflected not just our success, but the values that had guided us all along: integrity, sustainability, and purpose. We returned to the workshop, but nothing felt the same. It was no longer just a place of labor. It was a testament to our resilience, our ingenuity, and our refusal to let others define our worth. Then one afternoon, the familiar growl of an engine drew my attention. I looked up to see my father's Audi parked outside. He stepped out alone, this time looking older, haggarded, tired. "Ashley," he said, his voice hesitant, almost fragile. "I made mistakes. I see that now. I thought I was guiding you, but I was only seeing what I wanted to see. I'm sorry, truly." I studied him silently. His words carried the weight of regret, but they couldn't erase decades of condescension and dismissal. I shook my head gently. "I hear you," I said, "but it doesn't change what's been done. I'm not here to repair your pride. Dad, I've spent 25 years trying to earn your approval. That ends now." He nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. I didn't need more. For the first time, I felt completely unburdened by their expectations. I had built something real, something lasting, and no one could take that away. As I returned to the workshop, Eric at my side, Sophie's laughter echoing from the R&D lab, I realized that we had achieved more than success. We had claimed our independence, our dignity, and our right to define our own story. The past was behind us, the future ours to shape. The morning after the acquisition felt surreal. Sunlight spilled across the property, illuminating the workshop and the acres of land my grandmother had left me. Everything, the barn, the tools, the smell of hot metal and chemicals, was mine. Eric and I stood side by side, surveying the space that had been both our sanctuary and battleground. "I can't believe this is real," Eric whispered, his hand brushing over the gold steel of the newly finished railing. $20 million. And it all started with a crazy idea in this little shop. I smiled, feeling a quiet warmth in my chest. It wasn't just an idea. It was persistence and patience, and refusing to let anyone else define what I was capable of. We spent the day planning the next phase of Forge Tech Solutions. The acquisition didn't mean the end. It meant leverage. The funds would allow us to hire a dedicated R&D team, scale our production, and expand applications beyond custom railings, industrial components, aerospace parts, architectural installations. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time, every decision was ours, entirely free of external pressure or interference. Sophie had already drawn up a blueprint for the expanded lab. "We can finally test larger structures, she said excitedly, pointing at diagrams filled with formulas, specifications, and notes on material behavior. I've been dreaming about this for years." I watched her, heart swelling with pride. She had sacrificed her conservation career, yet never complained. She had stood beside me through every late night, every failed experiment, every moment of doubt. And now she was ready to lead the scientific church, confident and empowered. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I walked the perimeter of the property alone. Memories of the last 25 years flooded back, the ridicule, the dismissals, The endless comparisons to cousins and siblings for decades I had carried the weight of their judgment like an invisible chain. But now it was gone. Completely gone. I paused near the old oak tree, the same one under which we had celebrated my wedding with Sophie. The memory of that day, once bittersweet, now felt triumphant. My family had attempted to define me, to limit me, to push me into their narrow view of success. And yet, here I was, having done exactly what I had set out to do, on my own terms. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke my reverie. I turned to see Rachel, smiling softly. "Thought I'd drop by," she said, carrying a basket of pastries. I laughed. "You always pick the perfect times to visit." She joined me near the oak, her eyes taking in the expanse of land and the workshop. "It's beautiful, Ashley. Everything you've built. It's more than just success. It's proof that you define yourself." I nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and calm I hadn't known in years. "It's not about proving it to anyone else anymore. It's about knowing it for myself," she smiled, a quiet acknowledgement of the battles fought and won. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself, to justify my choices, or to seek approval. Everything that had been stolen from me in spirit over the years had been reclaimed in reality. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm that was both thrilling and deeply satisfying. Forge Tech Solutions expanded rapidly, gaining attention from manufacturers and engineers eager to implement our patented processes. Eric's focus on the business side kept operations smooth, while Sophie and I continued innovating, each breakthrough a testament to our collaboration and resilience. I began mentoring young women interested in STEM and fabrication, sharing my story not just as a tale of financial triumph, but as a lesson in perseverance, self-belief, and courage. Their eyes lit up with the same spark I had once carried alone in the corner of a metal shop. I realized that the legacy I wanted to leave wasn't just about wealth or patents. It was about inspiration, proof that refusing to settle and trusting your instincts could yield extraordinary results. Months later, I finally received an email from my father, short, formal, and awkward. It read, "Ashley, we've heard about the acquisition. We are proud of what you have accomplished." Dad, I read it and smiled faintly. For 25 years, his pride had been conditional, fleeting, and often withheld. Now, it didn't matter. I didn't need it to validate my life or my choices. I had forged my path, created something meaningful, and surrounded myself with people who mattered. Eric, Sophie, Rachel, and the team at Forge Tech Solutions. That was more than enough. As I stood once more by the oak tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in deep oranges and purples, I felt a sense of peace and triumph. The past had tried to define me, to limit me, to humiliate me, but I had emerged stronger, smarter, and free. Every trial, every mockery, every challenge had been a stepping stone to this moment. And in that moment, I realized the ultimate truth. Freedom, achievement, and fulfillment were not gifts to be earned from others. They were victories we claimed ourselves. The workshop hummed in the background. The metal smelled of fire and possibility, and the future stretched wide and uncharted before us. For the first time, I was not just surviving, I was thriving. And this was only the beginning. The weeks following the acquisition were a quiet storm. Forge Tech Solutions had gone from a small, almost secretive venture to a recognized force in materials technology. Manufacturers, aerospace engineers, and construction firms sought us out. Every inquiry, every contract felt like validation, not just of the work we had done, but of the resilience that had brought us here. Eric and I spent long nights in the workshop, reviewing patents, discussing expansion plans, and strategizing for the next phase. Sophie became the beating heart of our R&D department, her expertise guiding the technical team. I watched her with admiration. She had been my partner in everything. And now, she was the leader of a growing enterprise built on our shared vision. One afternoon, Rachel stopped by again, carrying her notebook filled with sketches for a new project. I think you'll want to see this, she said with a knowing smile. We went into the workshop, and she laid out designs for a modular railing system optimized for both structural integrity and environmental impact. The innovation was breathtaking. I realized in that moment that our combined efforts weren't just changing our lives, they could impact industries. Ashley, Rachel said softly, I've never doubted you. But seeing this, you've exceeded even my expectations. I felt warmth spread through me. It wasn't just me, I said. It was all of us, Sophie, Eric, you. We created something real, something lasting. The next visit from my family came unexpectedly. A small envelope arrived at the workshop addressed in my father's familiar handwriting. I opened it to find a handwritten note. Ashley, we've reflected on everything. We now understand too late what we failed to see. We are sorry. I read it slowly, my emotions, a mixture of indifference and pity. 25 years of dismissive comments, judgment, and attempts to undermine my life couldn't be erased with a single apology. I put the note aside. There was nothing left to salvage in that relationship. Not for me, not for Sophie, not for our future. The real closure came a week later during a quiet evening on the porch. Eric, Sophie, and I sat watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky glowing in fiery shades of orange and purple. For the first time, there was no tension, no lingering resentment, only possibility. You've come so far, Eric said, breaking the silence. And you've done it all on your terms. I nodded. It wasn't easy. Every step was challenged, every triumph questioned. But now we define our own story. Not them, not anyone else. Sophie reached over, her hand resting on mine. And it's just beginning. There's so much more we can do, I smiled, feeling a surge of hope and determination. Forge Tech Solutions was no longer a secret, no longer a hidden gem. It was a symbol of what could happen when you refuse to let others dictate your worth. Every product, every patent, every new project carried the story of resilience, of defiance, of triumph over doubt and ridicule. Months later, I held the grand opening of our expanded workshop. Engineers, innovators, and young students walked through, marveling at the technology and craftsmanship. We showcased the modular systems, the aerospace-grade components, and the environmentally conscious techniques. Young girls approached me, their eyes wide with excitement. Can I do this, too? They asked. I knelt down, looking them in the eye. Absolutely, I said. But remember, don't let anyone tell you what you can't achieve. Keep learning, keep creating, and trust your instincts. You define your path. The feeling of giving back, of inspiring others, was profound. It was a far more enduring reward than money or recognition. It was a way to break the cycle of doubt, of ridicule, of underestimation that I had endured for decades. As the night fell, Eric and I walked back to the oak tree. The workshop lights glowed softly behind us, casting long shadows on the land my grandmother had trusted me with. For a moment, I allowed myself to reflect on the journey, the fear, the struggle, the mockery, and the ultimate triumph. Do you ever think about them? Eric asked quietly. Sometimes, I admitted, but only to remind myself why this matters so much, not because they doubted me, but because I refused to be limited by their expectations. He nodded, understanding perfectly. Together, we stood under the oak, watching the stars emerge, feeling the peace of finally having agency over our lives. I knew one thing for certain. I would never allow anyone to diminish my worth again. Forge Tech Solutions, our life, our dreams, they were ours to shape. And in that moment, I felt invincible. Not because of wealth or patents, but because I had reclaimed my power, my freedom, and my legacy. The land, the workshop, the projects, they were more than just property or business. They were proof that belief in oneself, resilience, and perseverance could turn ridicule and doubt into triumph. Proof that even the most dismissive voices could not define who I was. And as I looked out over the horizon, I felt a quiet, unwavering certainty. This was only the beginning. A year had passed since the acquisition of Forge Tech Solutions. The company had grown beyond what I had ever imagined. New offices in the city, teams of engineers, designers, and chemists, all working under Sophie's guidance. Our patented technologies were now used in everything from skyscraper railings to aerospace components. But it wasn't the accolades or the money that filled me with pride. It was the journey and the fact that we had remained true to ourselves throughout. Eric and I had moved into a new home on the property, a modern house that still felt like home. Because it was built on the land my grandmother had left me, we kept the oak tree intact, a symbol of resilience and roots that could never be shaken. Sophie continued to thrive, splitting her time between overseeing R&D and mentoring young engineers, while I focused on innovation, strategic partnerships, and teaching interns the value of persistence and integrity. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Olivia, pale and fragile-looking, timidly approached the workshop doors. I remembered the arrogant, mocking woman from the past, the one who had once treated Sophie and me as insignificant. She looked different now, worn down, humbled. "Ashley," she began, voice trembling. I just wanted to see to understand. I didn't interrupt. I simply observed, remembering every slight, every insult, every assumption she and her family had made. "Over the years, I see what you've built," she continued, tears welling up. "I was wrong. We were all wrong, Matthew. Everything's gone. And I can't fix it. But I wanted to apologize. Truly." I nodded slowly. "I accept that you recognize your mistakes. But understand this, my life. My success isn't here for your redemption. It's mine because I refuse to be defined by your judgments." She looked at me, eyes white and shimmering with remorse. I needed to say it. "Then say it," I replied softly. She did. And then quietly she left. I watched her go, feeling nothing but closure. It was a strange kind of liberation. No anger, no desire for vengeance. Just the finality of a chapter closed. Days later, I returned to the workshop with Eric and Sophie. We walked past the machines, the CNC mills, the rows of patented prototypes, and the glowing CNC plasma cut designs. The place hummed with life, with energy and promise. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Eric asked, his hand brushing mine. "I can," I said, smiling, "because we never let them define us, because we believed in what we were building, even when the world mocked us." Sophie laughed softly. "And now the world wants to follow our lead." We spent that evening under the oak tree, the sun dipping low behind us. For a moment, I let myself imagine the life my family could have shared with us if they had chosen support over judgment. Then I let the thought go. It didn't matter anymore. Our life, our achievements, our legacy was ours alone. Months later, I hosted a mentorship program for young innovators, mostly girls. In the workshop, I shared my story, how ridicule, doubt, and underestimation could be transformed into fuel for ambition. The excitement in their eyes reminded me of my own younger self, dreaming of welding metal and creating something real while the world laughed. "Never let anyone tell you what you're worth," I told them. "Your creations, your vision, they are yours to nurture. Protect them, grow them, and trust yourself." The applause that followed was sincere, untainted by envy or expectation. It felt different from the forced praise of my family. It was authentic, earned, and deeply satisfying. In the quiet moments, I still thought of my grandmother's gift, the land, the workshop, and the journey that had led us here. Every project, every patent, every risk taken was a testament to perseverance and integrity. Eric, Sophie, and I were no longer defined by the past. We had built something enduring, not just a business, but a life of purpose, agency, and freedom. And as I looked over the horizon from our porch, the workshop glowing softly behind me, I felt the ultimate truth settle in my chest. Triumph is sweetest when it is personal, self-earned, and unshakable, we had rewritten our story, not for anyone else, but for ourselves, and that was victory in its purest form. The sun set behind the oak, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. The land was ours, the workshop was ours, our dreams, our legacy, they were ours, and nothing, not mockery, not doubt, not family pressure, could ever take them away. The past was a lesson, not a shackle. The future was ours to shape, and for the first time truly completely I felt at peace.